So now I'm about to introduce the man of the hour, Riaan. Please come up and tell us all about your experience of your rebrand.
Yeah, slow down with the man of the hour talk there. Let me just get this. Let's see if I can figure this out. Yes, I can figure it out. Amazing. Hi, everyone. Just also want to, as a starting point, say thanks to Luke and Gabby and their team. Like this, they run these things in their own time. It's an incredible amount of work that goes into it. So thanks, guys. Let's say thanks to everyone that notices. Thanks to them. And a little shout out to, yes, definitely, a few weeks ago, or months ago, last time I think, Tracy was here, telling her story and showing us all the cool bottles. So we were like, how could we get involved? And it's been a really interesting sort of experiment that we've been trying to do with them in really coming up with new and cool ways to expand their reach and potentially involve more animators in their workflow and their product. We did a trial run with using QR codes. You can see them at the back there. Sorry, my iPad's gone now, but actually we can just play that. I don't have audio, so Merry Christmas. Oh, it doesn't audio. Do I need to play it? Yeah. Let that play in the background. It's a bit of a trial run. I think we're they're looking at all sorts of fun things. They're super cool to experiment with. We're looking at possibly building NFC labels that you actually don't have to scan the QR code, you just literally tap your phone on your product. And it's just a really interesting and unexplored avenue of collaboration between a digital space and integrating that with physical products. They're also just really cool. So I think if you're looking for cool ways to collaborate, just chat to Tracy at any time. Yeah, a little fun bottle. So if you scan the QR code in the bottle, it takes you to a little animation of it, which is just a nice way to showcase the art a little bit further. That's just my little side. It's not actually all we're talking about. So, everything is okay, and maybe that's fine. A pragmatic guide to being a quote-unquote creative. I'm really sorry if that comes across as a little bit depressing. It's really not my intention. Some people know me as a bit of a bummer. I'm joking. For those of you who do feel a little bit sad, we brought some cookies. And you'll see on most of them, a good portion of them have we call them misfortune cookies, unfortune cookies. They're sort of the opposite of a fortune cookie. They don't tell you anything good. They tell you something very realistic and, just it's real. Sorry. It's not that great, but it's not that bad either. And that's important. Anyway. I also really tried not to make this whole thing feel very self-helpy. I'm going to try and squeeze as many practical tips into a bit of a weird existential view. Sorry, this thing is bugging my eyes. The weird existential view of a rebrand. This is definitely, if you came thinking you're going to look at cool logos and how to make the O fit in the logo, sad. It's not happening. But I want to get as many creative, practical points across here. So, a little bit about me. I'm from a company formerly known as New Creation Collective. It's wonderful to be able to say that after a long time of rebranding. We've always kind of had our foot in two camps as a company. Half post-production, classic advertising and film, and half the side, very much based in motion design and animation. In fact, the original animator for New Creation Collective was Richard Bolland, wherever Rich is, who's now obviously started Studio Bolland, and everyone knows that. We sort of continue to grow along these hybrid lines of motion and post, and at the time it felt, which as a side note, I think all of us in the company love it. We have such broad interests, and it's been such a nice thing to actually be able to exercise all of that. A couple of us, a couple of our team guys here, we branch from visual effects to, if it's on a computer, we're kind of happy, and it's been really nice to explore that. But the company's grown along those hybrid lines. Over time, we felt it was really necessary to give each kind of side of it its own distinct identity. At some point, you grow to a point where you it's not a confliction, but they almost deserve their own breath to grow into something new and look like the people that inhabit them. It became a time where we had to take some risks, and I think it's also fun to sometimes take a bit of risks and reinforce these brands individually. So then and then again we're born. There's a whole long story about where the names come from. Paul at the back there with the very, very, very cute baby. He can give you a very detailed look at that. Like I said, if you're hoping for a big brand talk from me, hope again. We have a little we had to sort of figure out a way to communicate these things. So we've kind of pushed people between the post side, the animation side, really split the company into two, essentially, from a visual perspective. I don't think practically much changes. It's still the same people, it's still the same interests, but the brands can live on their own. And I think it's useful to say that to people, because I think people, you look at it and be like, oh, these are these, nothing's actually changed practically, except for our intention and how we want to treat the work. And that's maybe a bit of a vulnerable look at it, and it's maybe not what everyone would want to say, but I think we're open to that discussion. Back to them again. So while I think a critical look at our brand could be very interesting, I thought that maybe it might be more valuable to take you guys through a bit of an abstract look of what we went through. It's been a very strange existential exercise that's forced us to take some vulnerable looks at ourselves, very much so. At the end of the day, it's very easy to be confident about yourself when you don't ever look in the mirror. And even more importantly, getting very critical about our work and objectives as a company, and what we want to do as a team. What values define us? What work do we want to be doing? How do we get there? How do we build a structure as a healthy team, stay creative, and do the work of doing in a competitive climate? Let alone one where you have to juggle your work with whether or not you might have electricity that day. These are the realistic things we have to deal with while trying to do cool stuff. It's not great. Through this process and chatting about amongst the team, and from some experience, I guess, the company's been going for about 12 years. I think individually all of us already have a decade or so experience. We tried to answer some of these existential ideas. So you guys are getting the answers to questions I'm not going to pose. If that's complicated, tell me about it. Cool. So the first case. The case for being average. Palliative care for imposter syndrome. At the end of the day, you're going to have imposter syndrome. It's really just about managing it. This is my life motto. Hi, my name is Riaan. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, but my name is Riaan and I'm very average. This is important. Luke is rolling his eyes. He's been hearing me go on about this for years. I don't mean this in a self-deprecating way. That quickly becomes very self-deprecating, right? It's like, oh, I'm so bad. Not what I'm talking about. I think we've all looked at around us and felt the darkness close in. And also, as a side note, I was talking to Isaac, it didn't help that literally 3 of my favorite motion studios in the world literally did a rebrand at the same time as us. It was exhausting. Paul and I, speed time, said why are they doing this right now? Does it matter? I don't know. I think it might not. We literally have a term for this, right? Imposter syndrome. We've gone through it. Sorry, before I jump to that. If we could chart skill, right? If we could chart our abilities, our skill sets, our creativity, our art, whatever, if we could chart it, then by definition, okay, if I create a little chart, I'm going to create a fake chart. This is the bad stuff, this is the best stuff. Where would most of you place yourselves, right? Kind of somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, 10 points if you're up there and you know it, by all means. And I think it's important to think about that, because also if all of us were at the top, if all of us were the best, mathematically that means we're all average to each other. I know that's not amazing math. Work with me. I do, though, think it highlights that it's about a point of comparison, right? So now I can go to my slide. So, if your point of comparison, I'm going to read this part. When your point of comparison is actually relative to an outside anchor point, right? Other than, other studios, artists, the aspirational stuff. I look at these amazing studios that I love. When you fall short of their work, which you will, it's just how it works, and it's by design, it will work that way, this is extremely destabilizing, let alone a little bit depressing. You know, I know I'm describing imposter syndrome. The problem is that this reference point we have isn't fixed to anything. It stays elusive. Let me demonstrate. But remember, I said aspirational work. If I go from here to like there, this point shifts with me. If it didn't, it wouldn't be aspirational anymore, right? Like if the reference point I'm looking at isn't also getting better as I'm getting better, then like it's pointless. It's just, you're going to get stuck at some point, right? Now, I have a slightly different way I like to approach it, and this is, I think, where it becomes a practical element, is an internal reference point. If your metric becomes that you're your own perfect average, then any development you have is seen as actual growth, not as a failure of reaching a goal that we've just discussed can't be reached, because even if you're doing the cool work, there's always the good work. It just is. You know, it's how it is. Are you better than you were yesterday? Are you better than you were last week? Are you better than you were last year? You know, this is a very important point, is don't use your best work as your reference point either. Like, not all jobs are practical, right? How often do we get to do our absolute best work? And it's not our fault. Client pressures, life balances, you know, you hurt yourself that day. That's a bad example, but you can work with your hands, fine. You know, there's a million stumbling blocks that are going to go against you in your practical day-to-day work. Clients, agencies, I mean, anybody who's worked with agencies know. There's feedback. You know, so don't use your best work as a point of reference, because that's going to bum you out too. To be honest, this is a nicer way to live for me. Whether it's that big of a difference, it's just a slight shift in perspective, really. It's a nicer way to live. It has a better impact, in my opinion, on my long-term growth and my mental health. It's really a matter of changing your perspective and allowing yourself not to try so hard, to return to enjoy what you do. This is where my quote of the day. It frees us from the self-imposed pressure to constantly perform and establishes personally focused metrics for growth. You know, along with don't judge it on the best project, judge your growth over time, not on individual projects. As long as there's a net gain over a period of time, you know, you could suddenly go into a job that like doesn't allow you to spread your wings and fly. Like, constantly grow, but there's going to be things that stop you from wanting to grow. But growth is important. As long as there's a net gain over time, then you're doing good. Average growth over time is what we're looking for. Mastery takes time, and we forgot that. I think another thing that bothered me for many years is this idea of artistry versus technicality and why nerds are needed. We all love great animations. We love fantastic art, you know. We look at the greats, and this is not a working script though, by the way. I tried, but man, it didn't work. We look at the greats and consider these works of art, and really we look at them and think, you know, what a pain in the ass that must have been to make. I think there's some people in the room that absolutely do think like that must have been a pain. Or you're thinking of the technical ramifications of what you did. My best example of this ever, and we've talked about it in the office a lot, is, I don't even remember those weird Facebook birthday videos. Like, they were cool. And there's a case study, I think Buck did it. There's a case study on how they executed it. But like, the first thing I thought when I saw it was like, there's like 800 million people on Facebook. Like, you have to render 800 million videos a year that are all dynamically linked. That part I can conceive of. But rendering 800 million videos and sending it to people on the day of their birth, that's nuts. The technical ramifications to that are mind-blowing. That I found more interesting than the video, honestly. I struggled for a very long time with this, being someone who preferred to dismantle projects over seeing them in glory. Even with my own work, there's always this slight sense of disappointment at the end of the job. Like, you finish the job and you're a bit like, nah, I don't get to do the fun stuff anymore. No matter how happy I am with the result, mind you. You know, I essentially settled on creating this distinction for myself. I don't think it's that binary. I don't think there's artists and technicians. I think there's a big mushy mix of the two, but I do think there's leanings. I think the artistry refers to the visual, obviously. Technicality is more about the problem solving, the execution of the visual. I think there's, in my opinion, this is purely my opinion, I think there's this very large overemphasis in most creative industries on this. Like, because that's ultimately what people see, right? And people who excel at that are often, we glorify them in ways that isn't necessarily helpful. And it's a dangerous focal point because it glorifies the image over the problem that it's solving, which we'll go into a bit more. In my opinion, it leads to meaningless trends with tutorial videos about tutorial videos replicating specific things, you know, and work that only really reflects what's cool at a very moment in time. Ironically, being focused on what's cool makes you not very cool. Don't chase trends. Trends are cool, but longevity is cooler. I've said cool a lot now. My main point here is essentially if you find yourself to be technically inclined, more technically inclined, it's not only okay, it has massive benefits. If you find yourself gravitating to math and not the image on the screen, constantly develop good taste. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Explore this. Lean into it. Be the one to code your animations, for goodness sake. Why not? We live in the era of ChatGPT. Go for it. Don't ask me questions about AI. However, and I think this is a very important thing, and this is something we, some of the guys and I have talked about. Just like there's no excuse for an artist to not be proficient at developing functional skill sets, I think you have to do, if you're a technical person, you have to do the work to ensure that you're constantly developing good taste. And you have to make sure you have a strong foundation in design, understanding design principles. I know for many of you this is going to be about as boring as reading expressions. At the end of the day, do your homework. The objective is to keep yourself sharp in your weaker points, your weaker aspects, but to give energy and lean into your skill set with focus and enjoyment, because ultimately that's what's going to energize you. When working on boring jobs, I often try, this is the little practical nugget, when working on really like tedious things, I often try to over-engineer one point of the project, like absurdly, depending on, it's time dependent, but just so that there's a sake of development, there's a sake of excitement, I can get, it gives me a way to like commit to the job in a new way. I get excited about the technical breakdown of it, whatever. That's my little nugget there. Don't tell me what to do. Learning how to thrive under creative, questionable input, talking about boring jobs. I've been doing this for a few years now, and I've worked at many different companies, and I've been to a lot of these events, and there's this general sentiment that I've come across the years that it's like a really poorly hidden secret in the industry, and it's something we try to keep from our clients, but I think we don't. And it's this idea that our clients are idiots, and they're always wrong, and our vision, is always, for something is always better. The client is not an idiot. I think this is an immature view, personally. I think a better way to look at it is to approach your job as if you're a design conduit to a solution that best suits your client. At the end of the day, it's their product, it's their service, it's their thing, whatever it might be, as long as it's not fossil fuels. They're trusting us to communicate for them in a way. So I think it's critical to know them and have integrity when speaking for them. The problem is when we prioritize our own sensibilities over client's objective, right? We end up losing energy and commitment to a job very quickly. Once the inevitable million rounds of feedback come in. I mean, we've all seen PSD final times the million. When they start running in, if you don't have the right perspective on the job, you're going to lose energy. When your client is your focus, it empowers you to finish your job strong, essentially. And that's a very practical solution to working in this industry, in this climate. And especially when it's cold and feeling jobs, right? We've all worked for, quote, cold and feeling insurance companies. Sorry. But, in fact, I think holding the sentiments is especially like valuable in those instances, and really brought life into working with some of these less than desirable clients. I think it can be summed up into a single phrase: animate for your client, not for your friends or your industry. And this is a phrase that gets thrown around occasionally. I've seen it before when it came up recently in a discussion in a Twitter feed internally, and I think it's very valuable and a little self-helpy, but I like it. This will make you invaluable to the majority of your clients who don't have the luxury of running wild with creative campaigns, which, I hate to break it to you guys, is the vast majority of the work you're going to be doing. I know that's a bummer, but hear me out. There's ways to overcome that, right? There's ways to change the way you look at it. My practical takeaway here is I have a very practical way of approaching when I do boring work. Another way is I find 3 adjectives. I try to do this for most clients in general, but I think it's really useful for your more tedious work. Find 3 adjectives that describe your intentions and your brand, and filter all your work through that lens, right? Here's some examples that I've put together at some point. It's 2 dots in a block, right? And this is maybe a good exercise to play with, is create 3 adjectives that describe the intention you want and move things in that way. This is very important when clients don't already have distinct motion identities, which is a bit of a luxury still, I think, in these days. I really love it when a client comes and they're like, oh, here's our motion brand guide. I mean, that's rare, but it happens. And I think finally, and here's the real bummer, your dreams will let you down, but hard work won't. Throughout this whole thing I've talked about, right, everybody's been sitting, but like, in the back of your head, there's this thing of like, but there's cool work out there. There's people doing the cool stuff. There's these studios that are doing the cool stuff. And I think there's hope at the end of the day. Most notably that I'm almost done. There are exceptions to this rule. We all have heroes in the industry. Some people are just amazing and talented and probably don't have to suffer the dread of being less than that. Obviously that's dumb, but play along for a moment. At the end of the day, even if you're this person living your best life in the best city in the world, working with the coolest studios, coolest brands, free reign, they let you do whatever you want, at the end of the day, I think your day and my day look basically the same. It's filled with hard work. I go to work, I sit down, I look at the brief, I work, and I graft. And that, the idea of fame, not fame, that's such a weird thing, but the idea of, the idealism of our industry lets you down all the time. But at the end of the day, even when you are doing the cool stuff, it's just hard work. And hard work is not going to let you down. You will succeed. Come to terms with that. It's really the common denominator between all of us. If you can learn to enjoy work for its own sake, you will flourish where you end up. And you will certainly be a lot more happy about it. Okay, I'm done now. You can have your cookie. Anybody have a question that doesn't require a psychologist? Just teasing. Ooh, Rich.
I'm coming.
What's that?
Hey, what's up? I just wanted to know, how would you recommend us as creatives prioritize kind of personal projects? You've spoken a lot about just working hard, and getting your client work done, but I wanted to know your perspective on having that creative freedom to do what you want to do, and finding that balance.
So, ironically, I've been working for a long time in the industry, and it's something I've only recently started exploring. And I think the best answer I have is slightly tangential to doing your own work. I've always really struggled with that. Being more technically inclined, I've having the vision for an idea. I'm not an illustrator, so my drawing sucks. I have some design principles and taste, I guess, but the best way I've found to do that, and I've really tried to lean into it more recently especially, is collaboration. I think that's a space where you, not only doubling up in personal projects, but you really get to do whatever you want, and if it's a fail, you just don't show anyone. At the end of the day, like there is that freedom to work and play. I think it's critical though. And it's something I'm trying to introduce more and more in our team. You know, we've got R&D time where we sit and play with stuff, and we're always trying more and more to implement that. Obviously, there's practicalities to that. But yeah, I hope that vaguely answers the question. I hate it when people ask questions and the people don't answer the questions even remotely right.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, what is your process? What you do to get out of that deep pit of despair after doing months and months of hard work? How do you get your creativity flowing again, and not just that, but feel motivated to get back onto that path?
That's a really good question, and I think, and it might just be coping mechanisms. I don't know, but I think that perspective of reminding myself that it's fine. Like the world hasn't ended, and to be fair, I guess I have, a bit of experience behind me to be like, at the end of the day, just showing up and working hard actually makes a bigger difference than being the best. I just remind myself that, it's okay to be a bit average. I don't know. It is a bit of a process. I can't tell you how many times through this rebrand. In the process, which is why I also didn't particularly go into the rebrand, by the way. It's because we're never going to be happy with it, and show and tell is just not going to happen. I think it's just reminding yourself that it's fine, it's okay. It's okay to suck sometimes. As long as you're growing on average, as long if you're average, it's fine. Just grow more from that average. Anyway, I hope that helps at all. Or go to therapy. I don't know.
Not looking at social
Or take a week off, yeah. Do something else. Actually do things, sorry, that is actually good advice though. Do something else. Stop trying. Just walk away, do something else. Go, and tangential. Don't even, I always try to do something that related to my career. I'm a motion designer, so I must take photos. Or, something else creative. No. Cook something. I don't know. Just do something else. Play a game. I don't know. Just don't focus on it. Hyper-focus is the biggest enemy you have. Yes, sorry. Yes. You'll notice that there's a very good reason why I wrote everything down. It's because once you get me started, I'll go down every tangent possible. Yes.
So I'm still a student, so as from that perspective, is there something you've learned in the industry that you would tell your student self?
I don't know. Sure. That's a tough one because I feel like it's one of those do you have any regrets in your life questions? I think if I could tell myself, if I have one regret in my sort of career so far, is don't overwork yourself. I think burnout is a very slow burn initially, and then when you hit a certain age, it comes on real rapidly. And I think I've been lucky enough to escape the worst of that. I don't think many people are. But I would be very careful to manage my time carefully, because while you're young, you feel like you have infinite energy, but that doesn't sustain you over a decade. That's just going to make you hate this industry in 10 years.
Thank you.
Someone's had a hard time back there.
Hey man.
Yes.
Yeah, just trying to figure out how I'm going to post this. Sorry, I should have thought about this before. So, if you're a freelancer, I know you're working for a company and you have a team, that's great. But if you're a freelancer, how do you keep yourself active in the industry? Make sure that people know you're there and that you're available and that you're keen for work. How do you
Yeah, so I think it's pretty straightforward. So as much as I work with a studio, at the end of the day, we're just quote unquote 4 freelancers that share a budget. Ultimately there's no functional difference, but barring we're not a corporation. We're like, there's 7 or 8 of us, and in different roles at any point. I think the answer for us is the same as for you, and I've been asking myself that question over the last few months. I think to maintain exposure of any kind, this is a fantastic place. Connection and network. I mean, as much as the word networking is such a business term, but at the end of the day, meeting people and hanging out with them is a great place. And then collaboration, and I can't stress enough how collaborating, but also trying to collaborate, a little bit broadly. So a good example was this, yes, definitely collaboration we did. It's kind of a weird place for an animator to be involved, right? We're talking about water bottles. But it was interesting. We've got a new audience of people now. Whether that turns into anything, it remains to be determined, but it's also volume, right? You being very practical, the more you do it, the more work you put out, the more you collaborate. I think collaboration is key because you're working with people, you get to know each other, that creates a connection. And I think if there's one thing I've found is our industry is super keen to collaborate. Everyone is working alone. Everybody's just desperate to have a friend to work with. Not in a bad way. Everyone loves it. It's so much better to work with other people. And that's obviously the benefit of a studio over a freelancer. But I think there's a lot of individual freelancers who would love to do that. Yeah.
Can I chip in there?
Yes.
If you join the Discord and the Slack channel, we often share jobs. And that's the big thing for me about this community is keeping the work in South Africa. So if any of us get work that we can't take on as freelancers, we share it in those channels. So that's a good place to look as well.
Yeah, there's often work being posted there.
Yeah.
So, thanks so much. So just a quick note as well, Clean Creatives, I know the message sounds very much like don't take work from these people, but really what it's actually about, we also have a Slack. So if you sign up to our pledge, you get a newsletter, a Slack, and we're building a community, an ecosystem of companies that are putting the planet first. There's a very cool B Corp in the UK called Jelly. You were telling me, Jellyfish? Jelly? Yeah, jelly.co.uk. So just Google Jelly Motion Design in the UK. It's really a growing movement of companies that want to prioritize the creatives that are prioritizing the planet, and brands are getting involved as well. So the more this grows, the more we support each other and build an ecosystem.
Amen.
Oh, hello. These are great questions.
Hey, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm being silly. Could you just explain how you mean with how do you go about collaborating? Is that passion projects that you make with friends, or?
So I'll give you very practical examples of what I did in the last 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks, maybe expand a bit longer. First collaboration we did recently was with Yes Definitely. I literally just DM'd on Instagram and said, hey, I saw you at the talk, we'd love to do some stuff with you, let's chat. She said, cool, came for coffee, we talked, we got very excited, had about 3 or 4 ideas that just failed miserably because they just weren't practical, and then something started in. We were sort of on the way. We were going to animate some other bottles' work, and it was this back and forward, and we got some artwork, and obviously it's illustration, so it's not necessarily prepared for animation, which is a whole other thing. And it was just having that connection, literally just reaching out. Isaac and I chatted in the week, I think, about potentially collaborating. Nothing's happened yet, but we've connected. To be honest, it really is just about reaching out to people until one lands. And meeting friends, and maybe you are. And I find a good way to go. I don't know if you're an illustrator or an animator, a bit of both.
Yeah.
Maybe you start with a bunch of illustrations that then you say, oh, is there an animator who wants to animate it? Slack, Discord, I'm almost certain there'd be interest. It's maybe a cool thing to. I think there are collaboration groups there, right? Yeah, there we go. I think that it's really just reaching out to people and asking.
Thank you.
Cool.
I'll say from personal experience, recently I just DM people on Instagram. So if I see somebody and I like their work, I just DM them straight and say, hey, would you like to do a collaboration? And sometimes people don't reply, but other times people are like, yeah, cool. So just put yourself out there and try to find it. It'll probably happen.
And be personal, don't be like a bot. People, collab, click this link. Bitcoin. Yeah. That it? Sweet, I think that's it.